Hey folks, welcome to another episode of BizTalks. We are excited to be here. We're excited that you are here watching BizTalk. My name is Rick Gutierrez. I am your host and your business advocate, and I'm extremely excited about today's show because we've got a great lineup of business professionals, business owners that are here, not only to talk about their business, but we're going to pick their brain a little bit as to everything that they have been through to find success in business. And all of that information is to your benefit because we are going to continue to grow our businesses from the experiences of others that are here to not only showcase their business, their expertise, but also teach us a little bit about business as well. So I'm really excited to get started. We've got a episode that is jam-packed of great content and great people that are going to be here on the show. Sorry, I lost my word there for a minute. But anyways, I want to bring up to the show Mr. Rickey Chavez, that's in the real estate industry. He has been in it for quite some time, and I call him an expert in the real estate market. Rickey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rick, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. I know that this is the first time being on this show for you, and we appreciate you being here and showcasing not only your business and your expertise, but trying to help some folks along the way. We're going to be talking about some real estate topics that are going to help some of those buyers and some of those sellers, but also educating our fellow business owners, business professionals that are out there just trying to generate business, right? So I want to get into the real estate market. Particularly, Rickey, I want to ask you questions in terms of strategies for those buyers and sellers. If you're up for it, we can get started. What do you say?
Sure, I'm ready when you are.
Fantastic. All right, so first question I have for you, Rickey. The real estate market, it's been through some ups and downs recently. What are some of the biggest changes in the real estate realm that you have seen here recently, just overall in the real estate market?
Well, some of the big challenges definitely is the interest rates. I think that's scaring everybody.
Right.
Rising interest rates can deter buyers and increase the monthly mortgages, so that makes people a little bit scared to make that commitment. And along with that, it for first-time sellers, they're like, oh, am I going to be able to get what I need to get on the sale of my home, and will people be willing to afford it? So that's one of inventory shortage is another thing that's out there. In many areas, there's still a lack of inventory. And so what happens then is that some places there's a few houses and there's maybe multiple offers. And we're still seeing multiple offers on homes like we did during the COVID area. But then we also have houses that are sitting a little bit longer because they're maybe priced a little incorrectly. Another thing is market uncertainty. With the economic fluctuation, it can create uncertainty out there. So people are,
Right.
Worried about what should I do? Should I, especially sellers, am I ready to sell my home? Am I ready to put it out there? And will I get what I want to get out of it?
Right.
And then, naturally regulation changes, the zoning, the property taxes and other regulations can shift. So that can always be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the real estate market, it's always an interesting industry. There are so many different variables that can happen, whether you're a first-time home buyer or, a previous buyer that is looking to either sell or move and whatnot. And if you're a seller, there are so many variables that can happen, from location to the size of the house to the size of the lot. It's just so many different things that play a big factor as to what the outcome can be for what you're trying to get out of it. And I think, Rickey, you hit the nail on the head to where, sure, interest rates is always at something changing, right? But it shouldn't be the focus on it, because when most people, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rickey, but when most people focus on, let's say, a buyer that says, well, I want to wait for the rates to drop a little bit, but what they don't realize is that while they're waiting, they could have potentially lost some equity on the houses they could have been building. Is that correct?
Oh, that's totally true. So a lot of times those people that are waiting, maybe they're renting, and when you rent, that's 100% interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the challenges for most people is to sit down with a professional and get educated.
Right.
Prior to coming to real estate, I was in human resources, right? And in human resources, anything having to do with pay, benefits, things like that, I took care of. And then if they asked about security, safety, I took them to the individuals that specialize in that. Well, when we talk real estate, real estate professionals out here, they're educated and in many cases they've had a good experiences out here. So when you sit down and talk with them and get educated about the climate, how to buy a house, how to sell a house, what are the strategies, how to price it, that can help a person make a good decision
Right.
versus I make this joke as I tell everybody has a degree in Google. They get out there and they Google things and they think everything there is perfect.
Right.
Well, in fact, it's not always so.
Right.
So the big thing is you got to be very creative when you sit down and talk to somebody about what the next step, whether you're going to buy a house or you're going to sell a house.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, in terms of first-time home buyers, I mean, the process could be a little overwhelming for first-time home buyers that have never been through the process before. What advice do you give your buyers to help them understand the market and make informed decisions?
Well, the number one thing is educate yourself, all right? Sit down, decide what's important to you. What is the haves you have to have? What are the things that are, would be nice to have? And then sit down and educate yourself. And the big thing, my first thing I always tell everybody is, what will be a comfortable monthly payment for you? What do you feel? Take a look at your bills, take a look at your budget, and find out, okay, if I'm looking about principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, what would be a comfortable monthly payment? And then I would have them sit down with a lender and get pre-approved. Because, what things that we see out here a lot of times, especially with the new buyer, is they get all happy, get all ready, find the place, but have not talked to a lender. And then they get so demoralized because they didn't get all their information up front.
Sure.
So sit down and talk with the lender. Lender can say, hey, Ricky, you're qualified for a house that's up to 400,000. So I find a house at 400,000 and then I see that payment. I'm like, oh my God,
Hmm.
I don't want that kind of a payment. So the payment's much more important than the amount of house that they can afford.
Right.
They do a little a little different here with the lenders. They say, hey, I want to stay around the 2,500 a month payment. What would that look like? And the second part, in Texas, many of these neighborhoods, the tax rate is different. So all this information is important for the first time home buyer to share with the realtor, and the realtor can help them with that, you
Yeah.
know, then so they can design the areas that they go look at.
Right.
Um, they have to understand their budget. They have to know the market, what schools are important, what's the education like in that area, just all the questions that they have. And it's okay to sit down and write down every question that's important to you about buying a house. You know, a lot of things that the new buyer doesn't realize is, there's three negotiations in a purchase. You're going to negotiate the price,
Hmm.
you're going to negotiate repairs, and then you're going to negotiate the appraisal if needed. So there's a lot of negotiating going on, and that's where you bring a professional
Sure.
realtor in the picture and let them help you with that.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to a point that you made earlier about people just going to Google and thinking that the information that they find in Google, or perhaps maybe even Zillow, they think that that information is either accurate or up to date. A lot of times there is a delay, and I think you can agree, Ricky, to where there's a delay
Sure.
to where the house may show that it's available, what you're seeing online, but it could potentially already have or be under contract, getting ready to close and whatnot. And so there is a lot of benefit to getting in touch with Ricky Gutierrez, not Ricky Gutierrez, Rickey Chavez.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, to get in touch with Rickey Chavez to help you and navigate through those, and he can give you up to date information. So, Ricky, I've got another question for you, but this is in terms of your sellers, right? So they're facing unique challenges right now. What strategies do you use to help your sellers maximize their home's value, and even in a fluctuating market like it is right now?
Well, so the most important piece of it all is the accurate pricing, right? You have to price your home to sell,
Hmm.
not to give it away, but to sell. And you know, I'll tell you, I always tell this story to my sellers. When prior to me becoming a realtor, my wife was a realtor. She saw I lived in a neighborhood in Bridgeland, and we had a house, and I was very emotionally attached to the house. We put a pool in the backyard, and I could not understand why she was pricing it the way she was. And now I understand that conversation because, we sold it, it appraised for what she listed it as. And I think that's the biggest challenge for sellers is they're very attached. They feel like their home is worth more than maybe the market supports. You
Right.
know, when you talk to a real estate professional, we typically all do it the same. We go into HAR, we look at what's sold in the last 6 months, and from that point, we put a market analysis together to show, basically you need to be within this and this number to sell your house. And then naturally, when I sit down and talk to my sellers, I'll tell them this is what the window looks like, and then they'll kind of, guide me to what they want to sell it at. But I always let them know this is where we're going to sell it, and typically we're right on the nose,
Okay.
pretty close.
Well, very good. That just showcased your knowledge. We've got a couple of minutes left, Ricky, but I want to showcase something that you mentioned when we were talking prior to the show starting. Your philosophy about don't chase this, build that, something that you coach your new realtors that you have on your team on how to go about building relationships. Tell us a little bit more about that.
But I'm proud to say I'm at Better Homes and Gardens, Gary Green, but we're the largest broker in the city under one broker. And Mark Woodruff is very good about allowing the agents to help him with his brokerage, and we have managers in all our offices that help coach these guys to success. One of the things I said to you earlier was, I teach my team, or really profess my team, is don't chase money, take care of people. When I mean take care of people, I'll be glad to let any of my clients. I have had my team in packing houses, packing U-Hauls, helping them clean, helping them move stuff. Because I think I told you earlier also, I'm retired military. I retired in 2002. My wife and I moved a lot of different places, and we understand the stress of moving, the transition to a new job, the transition of everything, and all the stress that a person goes under. So it's really important that we help minimize that stress for each of the buyers or the sellers to help them, do their journey a lot easier. So for that reason, I said, hey, listen, we take care of it. And that's why most of my business now is from referrals and past
Absolutely.
business.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. So it's basically about not chasing money, but taking care of your clients, taking care of your customers, build those relationships, and they're gonna,
Roger.
it's gonna turn right back around and provide us. So Ricky, thank you so much for being on the show. We definitely do appreciate you being here and showcasing your expertise. But just right before we go, showcase a little bit of how some folks can get in touch with you.
Sure. My number is 832-541-7545. And my email is ricky.chavez at Gary Green, and Green's with an E on the end.com. And as you can see on this picture, my daughter Brittany, she's
Okay.
part of my team. She kind of manages the office.
All right.
So it's a family business.
All right, fantastic. Well, Ricky, we appreciate you, like I said, for being on the show. Thank you for showcasing your expertise, and I look forward to having additional conversations with you in upcoming shows. So I appreciate you being here.
All right, Rick, have a great day.
You too, buddy. All right, folks, we've
Bye.
come to the end of this particular segment. Stay right there. We'll be right back with another subject matter expert. Hey folks, welcome back to BizTalk. If you are just now tuning in, my name is Rick Gutierrez, your host and your business advocate, and I am excited for our next segment, which we have a repeat offender on the show. We are good friends, and she is extremely knowledgeable, and every single time that we have a conversation, we learn a little bit more about the financial planning and forecasting and things like that in terms of bookkeeping. So Ms. Noura, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. It's always a great time having you on the show because we learn quite a bit and you educate us quite a bit. I mean, you've been in this industry for so long, so showcasing your expertise is what we are grateful that you do, and provide you with this platform, and our viewers can also learn from you as well in case they are having or planning on building a nonprofit or a for-profit business as well. So I've got a topic, a very interesting topic, because I think as we were coming into the end of the year, we're actually in Q4 right now. A lot of people are taking care of Q4, but also planning for 2025 as well, right? So it's my topic and my conversation with you here today is more about planning for long-term sustainability for both nonprofit and for business. So if you're ready, we can dive in and pick your brain a little bit in this realm. What do you say?
Let's go.
All right, so financial forecasting, it's super critical for both nonprofits and business. So how do you help these organizations, especially nonprofits, with unpredictable funding? Sometimes it can create reliable financing forecasts that could guide them to long-term sustainability, but sometimes it is unpredictable. So how do you help them? How do you navigate those systems, those conversations with them?
Sure. So the main thing for nonprofits, or really any business, for profit or nonprofit, really to have a goal in mind. What do we want to achieve in the next 12 months, in the next year? And how are we going to achieve it? And then we can work backward, reverse engineering on how can we provide the fund for what we want to achieve. How many, for example, if you're running an ad, marketing, anything, like what do you need? What's the tools you need in place in order to advocate, in order to reach your goal, in order to arrive to your destination? So, and then you figure out like how much everything is going to cost you, and now how are you going to get that? So for nonprofits, I love individual donations. Now, this is not the only source, but this is 75% of the funding for nonprofit. That's how it should be. So, and individual donors is a diversity on its own. So if you lost one donor, you're not going to break. Now, you don't want to just rely on that. You want to keep that program going. You want to keep asking for more donations, keep building your donor base while you are working on other source of income, like available grants for what you are planning to do, foundation supports, like corporation supports. Work with someone who is knowledgeable about each one of these categories, because they are different and different people can be stronger in each of these arena. But the main thing you have to have is the plan, strategic funding. And a lot of people talk about just like how to have a funding plan, but this should be just part of a bigger strategic plan. So you should always have this strategic plan for like a period of time, 5 years, for example, and then break it down into years, and then into quarters, then into months, and revisit this plan all the time. This is a working in process document. You need to always update and check what's going on. What do you need to do now? What do you need to do later? If you follow the plan, if you know what you are trying to achieve, you have no problem of getting this money, especially when you tap into your 75% of funding.
Yeah, so if I was to start a nonprofit right now, I think I heard you correctly. I mean, you said a lot of amazing things, don't get me wrong, but one thing that you mentioned is individual donations is 75% of the donations or the cash flow for the nonprofit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
because a lot of people mistakenly think, okay, we should get grants. We're not getting grants. Well, you're not going to be competitive in that area unless you are building your organization on this foundation. Like at least 75% should be grant. Actually, there was like 2 latest study on how many, where is the funding coming from for nonprofits. In 2022, it was 64% individual donations. And then in 2023, it was a little bit more, like 67% individual donations. But the average over the years, it's about 70 to 75%. So this is, people donate. Everyone would love to donate. So you have to capitalize on that. You just have to find your ideal donors for the organization.
Right. Okay. Well, that's critical information, because as most people would think, if you're going to start a nonprofit, they're just going to go and try to get grants, from the get-go and whatnot. But the power is with individual donations, and that's something that a lot of people may know but may not know as well. So I appreciate you elaborating a little bit more on that. All right. So cash flow management. it's also a challenge for any organization, right? What strategies do you guys implement to help both nonprofit and for-profits to ensure that steady cash flow, even in uncertain times?
So cash flow should be always coming, meaning you always have to recruit new donors, new clients, always have that machine going on. So you are not in that period of time where you don't have anything coming. So someone has to always be there, like getting those donations, those clients coming into the pipeline. So this is one machine you should not ever, should never stop. The other side of it, like when you get the money, how are you spending the money? How are you diverse? So where do you spend? Like, do you spend it on just spending money without any investment, or are you reinvesting the money in your business, in your nonprofit to generate even more? Sometimes it can be like hiring someone in-house, or maybe work with an expert, be it in marketing, be it in fundraising, be it in accounting and CFO services, all of these. Sometimes the investment could be staying in compliance, because guess what? If you are not staying in compliance, you could spend so much money in penalties and other unnecessary expenses that you're going to lose the money you worked hard to generate.
Absolutely. So it's nobody wants to do that, right? So the reason I say that is because my next question kind of leads into that: how to mitigate risk, but more particularly by the financial health of a nonprofit or a for-profit, for any business actually. How do you guys develop financial strategies to mitigate risk when diversifying their revenue streams?
So my favorite one is really increased cash, because you have to have some cash in hand to make sure like you are ready for anything happening. But my favorite thing is always have that cash coming. So this is the best strategy. And I know, like, I guess since any one of us like were born, like we always hear about like uncertainty. It's a difficult time. It has been always a difficult time since I was born. I never heard of any other time. So, but always there are people who are winning. So if you have a plan, if you keep at it, if you learn how to do the right thing, if you work with experts, you're going to win no matter what. That is what you should think about. And if you are scared, you're going to be always having this scarcity mindset, and mindset is key with any business or nonprofit. If you keep scarcity mindset, you will never have enough cash flow, and you will always be having those risks, like you're always like not sure if you can pay yourself tomorrow, if you can implement your program, if you are going to pay your employees. You won't be able to fulfill any of that just because of your scarcity mindset. While if you have an abundance mindset, and you know that when you work, when you do the right thing, you're going to see the fruit regardless. You are going to arrive to your destination and find the destination beyond that, just because you are working on the right thing and you are improving on your personal level and your skills, improving your employees, and you're always focusing on those cash to help you during tough time, good time, to reinvest, to grow your business and nonprofit.
Yeah, so I think, to a certain degree, all business owners, business professionals will go through some type of stress, right? But when you're not able to manage that or manage that risk, then you're gonna have an additional type of stress that nobody wants to have, right? So I appreciate you elaborating on that, because it seems like we forget that other aspect to where we do end up getting stressed out if we're not, putting our best foot forward when it comes to our finances, when we're thinking about scaling the business up. Which kind of leads me to my next question for you, Noura. Financial management obviously plays a vital role. How do you guys help businesses in developing financial strategies that support growth and maintaining that for the fiscal responsibility of the year?
Sure. So the best thing to start with, like as a budget, which is the financial plan. So this is the budget. See how much we spend, how much did we get, like the history of our financials, and see where we want to arrive in terms of numbers, and then plan for that, and see how are we going to allocate our resources to make sure we arrive to our destination without any interruption, and keep bookkeeping in place. You have even more. Bookkeeping is just the foundation, but usually like those CFO clients, like we are their CFO. Like I'm the CFO for them, like the partner, so we can work together on how to really make sure we are having an accurate key performance indicator, KPIs, and checking in place like every week, every month on how we are doing and how are we going to improve and how do we reach our destination. It's all with numbers, measuring, and also increasing the cash flow, being maybe you are increasing the budget for advertising if your advertisement is working. Maybe it's just recruiting a salesperson. So just like have the budget, this is your guide for numbers, and then have the component that's going to help you to reach to your numbers destination.
Absolutely. So awesome information. Thank you so much for being on the show again. We always learn so much from you, and your expertise is, it's valuable to everyone, right? We all need bookkeeping and keep our finances straight and all that good stuff. So Noura, before we go, I want to give you a little bit of space to showcase how our viewers can get in touch with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Rick. So anyone can reach out to me through my website, nourasbooks.com/contacts. So if you go there, you can book a time on Zoom and then we can talk together. You can also subscribe to my mailing. We have like different components for nonprofit, for business, and for if you can also do for everything. So you can receive regular communication from me. So yeah, like just go to my website, like follow me on YouTube.
Awesome.
And
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here, for educating us a little bit more every time. I look forward to additional conversations we're going to have in future segments. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. All right, folks, we have come to the end of this particular segment. We're going to be right back with another subject matter expert. Stay right there. Welcome back to BizTalk. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us here during this episode. I am Rick Gutierrez. I am your host and your business advocate, and I've got an amazing guest who we are going to be hearing from here shortly. He is a mastermind, or Mr. Cybersecurity, as I like to call him. He is our expert when it comes to everything that has to do with strengthening your cybersecurity and keeping your network secure and all of those amazing things. So, Greg Schaffer, welcome back to the show.
Happy to be back, Rick.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I think we always have a great conversation. You educate us quite a bit every time that we have these conversations because, cybersecurity is completely different from IT. I get that, so many people confuse them. They think that if they have IT, they're good with cybersecurity and all those good things. So we are going to showcase not only your expertise, but also educate those folks that think that if they just have an in-house IT person, that is all good. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. And, it's for small and mid-sized, but obviously large corporations, it's a huge deal for them as well. So what do you say we get into that conversation?
Let's do it.
All right. So strengthening cybersecurity resilience for small and mid-sized businesses, I mentioned, is the conversation, is the topic. Greg, I mean, you work with so many different businesses from small to medium, right? Businesses often don't have some of those resources like large enterprises, have, and they invest in cybersecurity. What are some of the most effective budget-friendly strategies that you recommend to help those businesses protect themselves from cybersecurity threats?
Rick, it all really always boils down to focusing on the basics. And really, what is the basics here? We're talking about information security is securing information by its name. And you can't secure the information if you don't know where it's at. So one of the first things that I emphasize, this costs nothing but a little bit of time, is inventory your information. Understand what you have and where it is, and also understand which aspects of that information, which what would be considered confidential or critical for your business, and what would be considered maybe public information like the website or something like that. But then you can apply, once you know where your confidential information is, you can apply controls to protect it. And that's really it comes to the next step is you want to know who has access to this information. So you need to be reviewing your users, who has access. Sometimes people terminate from a company, for example, and they forgot to drop their account. Or sometimes people within the company, they have more access than they really need. Again, that's a no cost way to help with information security. Now, as far as something a little bit more technical, maybe follow a framework such as the CIS 18 or the NIST cybersecurity framework. You don't have to meet all the requirements of those frameworks because sometimes not all the requirements are applicable to your business. But what you do want to do is document the ones that you don't meet requirements for and why. Sometimes it's because it's not really applicable to your business at all, but sometimes it's just you have other things that you have in place to mitigate the risk associated with that.
Right.
Really, what it all boils down to is to figure out the high risks, work on those, don't get hung up on low risk issues.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. There is something that is increasingly targeting small organizations, and that's ransomware. We've all known of it for many, many years now, but it's increasingly, targeting those small organizations. It's increasing more and more as we go. So, your company, vCISO Services, you guys help develop some proactive defenses, and what steps should companies take in the event of an attack?
So some of the defenses that we do is that we help prepare them. We do a ransomware tabletop, ransomware risk assessment rather, and then we'll do a tabletop exercise, which is basically we sit around a table. We talk about what happens if like ransomware actually hits your system. And the reason why you want to do this is because you want to understand your risks and you want to understand how you're going to respond before it actually happens. Rick, I talk about something called triggers. And what I mean by triggers here is like, what is the trigger that is going to make your business pay the ransom? A lot of times businesses will say, well, we don't pay the ransom whatsoever. We're never going to pay the ransom. But when you're faced with actually losing your information, you might have to pay the ransom no matter what. It's
Right.
it's just a matter of keeping your business in business. So if you're hit with a ransomware attack, understand the triggers that will get you to how you're going to respond, first of all. And second of all, make sure that you have contacts for your FBI or other law enforcement to get them involved as early as possible as well, because they can also help with the remediation so that you suffer less due to the ransomware.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but sometimes we do have to end up paying that ransom, right? So it's something that, but it can definitely be prevented if you have the right company that is helping you put those defenses in place so that you don't have to go through any of that. So, Greg, so cybersecurity compliance regulations are becoming more complex nowadays. How do you help businesses navigate the evolving landscape of compliance requirements?
Well, while regulations are becoming more complex, the basics, as I said in the beginning, they remain just that, the basics. And some of the complexity might be there's a new threat or a new tool out there. And I like to talk about something called generative AI when talking about the new risks. So generative AI, people might know it more as like ChatGPT or Copilot. It's relatively new, been only around really out for the general public now for about 2 years. Very useful tool.
Right.
Just a lot of people use it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there are risks associated with it. Now, it sounds like this ominous high mountain to climb. Like, how are we going to deal with the risks associated with generative AI? Well, it's really simple. Understand the risks involved first, and then realize that it's going to get back to the basics. As I said before, it's all about understanding where your information is and where it shouldn't be. That's one of the biggest risks with generative AI. Don't put your information out to a public site. And then have policies in place to massage that. Usually for AI risks, you don't really need some corporations will have a separate policy for it, but usually it's just adding a few lines to your corporate information security policy or acceptable use policy, and then let your users know. These are the things you can do with it. These are the things you can't do with it. And these are things that the regulators are going to want to look for, because going to want to know that not only have you been taking care of the basics for things that you already know about, but are also responding well to the threat changes in the environment.
Right. And would you say that, certain industries like maybe healthcare or finance, would they have stricter regulations?
Oh, I would say so, absolutely. I think that finance is the most highly regulated industry, just right behind or right in front of healthcare. So finance, you have the FFIEC, and healthcare, you have the HIPAA. And both of those, it's the same thing. If you look at those regulations and standards, they're all talking about looking at the basics as well, too. Really, the guidance, I take the FFIEC guidance for finance, for example. The guidance hasn't really changed since it came out in 2006. Even though the threats have changed, the guidance still is applicable to the evolving threats.
Yeah, no, I kind of figured that's wanted to be specific in asking that question, because I think there are certain, industries that are going to have more, they're going to be a little bit trickier or more complex than others. So we've known that since COVID, since 2020, there's still a lot of people working remotely, right? And cybersecurity challenges has always been an issue for a lot of businesses. So what advice do you give to a small or mid-sized business on securing their remote workforce, and how has this shifted in cybersecurity landscape in the recent years?
Well, I think that remote users need to understand that they have to treat their workspace as if they were in the office. There are certain things that you may not think that you need to do at home, but it's even more important to do at home in some aspects. So some simple things: keep a clean desk. And what that means is don't keep confidential information on your desk. Well, yeah, the chances of somebody seeing that, I understand you're physically secure in your house. You don't really have public walking by back and forth, but it's still good to get into the habit. Same thing with your monitor. You want to make sure you're not exposing your monitor, because and don't have conversations where others can hear, because perhaps you're on a speaker conversation and nearby one of your family members is on the phone, and that information can kind of leak over as well. And then also some of the basics about the cyber part, make sure that your network is configured correctly. Your internet connection, make sure you're using a router that is up to date. We always talk about making sure your firmware is up to date. Make sure your wireless is configured correctly, and that's can be very simple, but it can also be very simple to not configure it correctly. And sometimes the bad people will get in through that. I always like it to have people have a separate network. You can do this with pretty much most of your small and home office routers nowadays. You can create like a separate network off of that for guests. You can also segment off your office equipment, or in my case, it's like I have a separate network connection for work at home, completely separate from my family's connection.
Right.
The bottom line is that sometimes we may work in our pajamas. It's great to be able to do that, but we can't sleepwalk through security.
Right. So one of those things I was going to mention is for those small to mid-sized businesses out there that still have people working remotely, or even for large organizations, if you guys were to have Greg Schaffer and vCISO services, you guys would automatically help those remote workforce workers, with things like reminders to update their passwords every so often, so that it just stays continued with a secure, network. I would imagine that's correct, right? You guys would set up such reminders, notifications?
Well, we would help them with their security, but actually it's interesting you brought that up, Rick. The NIST just came out with guidance where they actually recommend not changing passwords on a regular basis.
Huh.
They prefer
Okay.
that you have long, complex passwords and that you use multi-factor authentication and you use a password manager. You see, even the advice evolves with the threats. So.
Absolutely. So that's wonderful information. So as you can see, we're learning as we go from the experts. So Greg, we've come to the end of this segment here, but I appreciate you being here. We learned quite a bit about cybersecurity every time that you're here, so we appreciate you.
I love coming on. Thanks, Rick.
All right, my friend. All right, folks, we are going to take a quick commercial break. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Hey folks, welcome back to the show. This is BizTalk. My name is Rick Gutierrez. I'm your host and your business advocate. I am having a great conversation with Mr. Greg Schaffer with VCSO Services, and we decided to continue the conversation because we are always having great conversations here on this show. But Greg brings in immense amounts of expertise when it comes to cybersecurity, and so this is something that is just continuing to develop and gain some really great momentum in terms of businesses needing cybersecurity now more than ever. And so, Greg, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, always great conversations, and you educate us. You're like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to cybersecurity. So,
a lot of people don't know what an encyclopedia is anymore. Though,
well,
so.
that's true. Nowadays, they don't even know what it looks like. I mean, there's this big old, you need a bookshelf for an encyclopedia. But let's talk about the role of cybersecurity when it comes to leadership and business growth. So there's got to be an enormous amount of leadership that is advocating always for cybersecurity, especially when you're talking about growing a business and or scaling the business to the next level, right? So cybersecurity is often seen as a defensive function, but how can strong cybersecurity leadership actually contribute to a company's growth and this competitive advantage in today's market?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there when we talk about competitive advantage. A lot of times when you see a breach out in the world, it's a big company that gets breached, but they get breached because the threat actors come in through a small company, one of their
Right.
third-party partners.
Mm-hmm.
And the larger organization does do due diligence on the third-party partners to make sure that their security program is up to snuff, so to speak. But really, the business themselves needs to work on their security program. Really, the problem that we have with this issue, it comes down to the small business's responsibility. And it's really a big risk with regards to our ecosystem here in the United States in particular. 99.9% of all businesses are small businesses, according to the Small Business Association. That's 500 or employees or less, give or take. And they employ over 45% of the employees in the United States. So this is a big issue. That's why focusing on small and mid-sized businesses is critical. Mm-hmm. Now, once that executive leadership understands that, first of all, they get a little bit more understanding. They get away from the idea of like, well, we're too small, no one's going to attack us. Right. No, you're small. That's exactly why they attack you. Yeah. Plus, once you start to be able to show externally, like through third-party attestations, like a SOC 2 report or an ISO 27001 certification, that you are serious about your security, that does a lot for your reputation as well, too. Folks are going to want to do business with you more, and customers are going to want to do business with you more. And particularly in the federal realm now, we're seeing that something called CMMC from the federal government is requiring the third-party subcontractors to have these security programs in place and to be able to demonstrate that as well, too. And that's a huge business enabler, because if you can't demonstrate that, you can't participate soon in right. federal contracts. And that could mean a lot of loss of funds and income for some small businesses.
Yeah, and nobody wants that potential for loss of revenue because you don't have all of your systems in place. So,
right.
So my next question is in terms of these businesses as they continue to grow, right? The security needs become more and more complex. So you guys over at VCSO Services, how do you guys help these companies scale their security strategies to match their business growth while avoiding unnecessary risk?
When we first start with businesses, we have to understand where they're at. Like startups, for example, they they're very immature in their security program. They maybe have a higher risk tolerance. They have very low margin, very low opportunity for error with regards to their income. And so we have to understand their, I'll use the word risk profile. Now, as the business starts to mature somewhat, then there are more things they can do. They're getting bigger. Their threats are going to get a lot more involved and complex. We have to understand the strategic plan of the business and mirror the information security strategic plan with that. So what I'm getting at here is that often the most important thing that a virtual CISO can do, including our firm, is not so much on the technical side or even on the information security side at first. It's understanding the business culture, understanding their risk tolerance, and then working with them on that. Because at some point in time, we're going to have to deal with some other issues. They're going to get big enough that they're going to have regulatory issues to deal with, for example. And we can't pile all of that on a small business right out the gate. It would smother them. And there's not that return on investment from doing that. It's upon us, and well, of course, biased, but at vCISO Services, we do this very well. We understand the business needs first and build the security program appropriately.
Absolutely, and I think you guys are the right company with the right expertise to be able to help navigate those systems for those businesses. My next question, though, it's a little bit more on your expertise with working with leadership teams and boards, to implement cybersecurity policies. What do you see is the most critical element of a successful cybersecurity governance framework, and how do you ensure the leadership will buy into it?
Well, we don't want to have them adopt a framework just for the sake of adopting a framework. And I've mentioned before that you will adopt a framework. It's a good place to start with one of the simpler frameworks like the CIS-18 or NIST cybersecurity framework, but you don't necessarily need to meet all of the requirements as you're first starting out, so long as you can document so long as you can document the ones that you don't meet and why you don't meet them. It might be, for example, this requirement isn't applicable to our business, or it may be that it's applicable, but we have other controls, other things that we do in place to mitigate that issue. And like one example might be that one of the frameworks might say that you need to secure your wireless network in the office. You need to secure your network in the office. We'll just leave it generic at that. Well, if you're a fully distributed company, that's not applicable because you don't have a corporate network, but you need to be able to document that. Now, from there, as far as leadership buy-in, the only way that this works, the only way, is if the security officer, the security professional, security consultant, whatever you would like to call us, we speak business language as opposed to speaking security language. Again, I get back to what I said before. We need to understand the business first and the risk tolerance, and then explain why this framework is going to help, which elements of the framework we want to talk about and deal with first. The ubiquitous 80-20 rule does apply here as well, too, which really, if you put that into words, you can do an awful lot by addressing a small number of items within frameworks. Well, businesses understand that. They understand it's like, okay, we can't do it all. We have to figure out a way. The way I like to say it is that my job is to help them understand which things that we can ignore for the moment. And I don't really mean ignore, but I mean this item, very little risk, let's put it off to the side. This item, very big risk, we need to work on it now.
Yeah, and that is the reason why you are the expert in talking with those leadership teams, because you are able to pinpoint exactly where the vulnerability is and where you need to focus on. So that's amazing. So as we know, there are so many new businesses and many existing businesses actually that are embracing the world of digital transformation. What role does cybersecurity play in facilitating innovation while ensuring that new technologies don't introduce unforeseen risk?
This is one of the gaps that we see sometimes with businesses. They get enamored with the idea of this new technology that's coming out. They start to go down the path of investigating and maybe even sending out RFIs and getting responses, and then eventually awarding a contract based on those requests for information from different vendors, all without involving information security first. And we have a saying, some information security, is that it's very difficult to bolt it on afterwards. Just if, in your mind, if you can imagine, like you have some sort of a mechanical device and then you bolt something on afterwards because you forgot to put it in the design. Whereas it makes more sense and looks nicer too if it's actually incorporated into the design. So businesses need to understand that, and part of that is conveying to them that we're not really, information security is not the office of no. We're the office of yes, but here's the least risky way to do it. Get us involved as much as possible first. If you don't have an information security consultant or an office, then contract with someone, anybody to help you with that decision. But I'll also get back to another one of the technologies that we've talked about before, as far as innovation. So much with generative AI out there, which is really transforming. It's the next big wave. I know that sounds almost like hyperbole in a way, but it really is the next big wave, I think, because it has the ability to make our jobs so much easier. It's not going to necessarily take away jobs as much as it's going to make it easier. But in order for it to make it easier, we have to understand the capabilities of generative AI, and we have to understand the risks as well, too. So, you know, I've said before about talking about coming down to the basics. Well, understand the technology, understand the digital transformation that you're trying to do for your company, the technology you're bringing in, the processes that you're changing, understand what information is involved and the risks involved there, and then work to mitigate those risks.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, by just having these conversations, Greg, we must have, you know, several business owners or executive leadership teams that are listening to you and they're like, man, we need to get in touch with vCISO Services, in particular, Greg Schaffer. So how would we, or how would our viewers get in touch with you?
The best way to do it is to go to our website. It's at www.vcisoservices.com. And there's a button on the front page which says schedule an appointment right there on the screen. You click on that, you'll get access to my calendar. We'll do a 15-minute free consultation and determine what the right path is for you. Sometimes it's not actually engaging a virtual CISO service. It's going somewhere else. And we're going to be completely transparent with you, because our goal is not to get more clients. It's to help you be as secure as possible.
Right, absolutely. Well, Greg, we've come to the end of this, segment show, and so we want to thank you again for being on the show and being an amazing partner here with us at Now Media. And so I think your expertise just goes a long ways, even in this small segments. A lot of our viewers are getting a lot of really great content and education. So thank you for being here.
And thanks for having me back, Rick. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us this week. We had great conversations with our guests. Hopefully you guys took some notes, and feel free to reach out. We're always here for you. This is going to be the end of this show for this week, so until next time, take care of each other.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.